Well, good evening, everybody. It's great to be back together again, and been a busy week for me. I'm not sure about you, but been a busy week for me. A lot going on, and I look forward to our time together on Wednesday night, and look forward to our time together studying God's Word. And so, what a great time to be together. Several people have commented and told me how much they enjoyed Wednesday night, but they also told me that, for some of them, they're working, they can't get home quite in time to join us live, and they're so thankful that they can watch it whenever they get home, or if something happened and they weren't able to join on that night, they were able to watch again at another time. And so, that's a wonderful blessing that we have that people can join us live, or they can watch it later, or they can join us live and then go back and watch it again later if there was something they wanted to pick up on, and something that they wanted to just listen to again. So it's a great thing, and I'm so thankful that we have been able to do this and been able to join together in this way, and continuing to enjoy our study on the book of Revelation. So I hope that you're settled in tonight and ready to go, and hopefully you have your Bible with you and you're ready for that, and you got your comfortable place to listen, and maybe even you've got your coffee with you, and so we're ready, right? We're ready to get going, and so let's open up with a word of prayer, and we'll continue on from there. So let's pray. Father, we do come to you this evening and thank you again for the opportunity to gather together in your name. Father, no matter whether we gather in person, whether we gather online, Father, whatever it is, we gather together for the purpose of studying your word. Father, tonight as we look at the 8th chapter of Revelation, Father, there's some incredible things that we can see there. And as I was reading it and looking over it again this afternoon, it's um, some things that just stuck out to me, Father, that I had not thought about before. And so I'm thankful that we can um, learn every time we open your word. Father, tonight, just open our hearts and our minds and show us what you would have us to see. Father, we ask it in the mighty, matchless name of our Savior Jesus. Amen. All right. So, again, we are continuing on in the book of Revelations, and we are in chapter 8. So, we finished up last week with chapter 7, and we're moving on to chapter 8. My intention is to cover the entire chapter, so we'll get started right away. So, if you take your Bible and take a look with me to Revelation chapter 8, and we'll begin in verse 1. Revelation 8 and verse 1, it says, "When he opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about a half an hour. And I saw the seven angels who stand before God, and to them were given seven trumpets. Then another angel, having a golden censer, came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense that he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar, which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints ascended before God from the angel's hand. Then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and threw it to the earth. And there were noises, thunderings, lightnings, and an earthquake. So the seven angels who had the seven trumpets prepared themselves to sound. The first angel sounded, and hail and fire followed, mingled with blood, and they were thrown to the earth. And a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. Then the second angel sounded, and something like a great mountain burned with fire, as was thrown into the sea. And a third of the sea became blood. And a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. Then the third angel sounded, and a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch. And it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many men died from the water because it was made bitter. Then the fourth angel sounded, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them were darkened. A third of the day did not shine, and likewise the night. And I looked, and I heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, because of the remaining blast of the trumpet of the three angels who are about to sound. So we see here, we um, talked about in chapter 6, we were talking about all of the seals, and we were talking about the ones that were going to be opened. And then in chapter 7, he opened the seals um, and went through. Um, he stopped after the sixth seal. I'm sorry, in chapter 6, and then in 7, it went further to talk about the things that had happened after that. And then now we're back in chapter 8, and we're back to the seventh seal. So a lot of things that we can see there, a lot of things that were going on with um, the seal being opened, and then the trumpets, and multiple things were going on there. So, um, Revelation chapter 8 kind of falls into three parts. Okay. Um, Chapter 8, verses 1 through 5 is basically talking about how our prayers will be answered. And then 6 through 12 talks about the first four trumpets. Now, understand, there's only four going to be covered in chapter 8, but there are more to come. So, the first four trumpets, and then the last part in 8 through 8:13 talks about woe to the earth dwellers, or the inhabitants of the earth. And so when we look at all this, we can see that um, there's a lot happening. And when we began our study in Revelation, it kind of started out with Jesus appeared to John in chapter 1. Jesus appeared to John in glory, and he issued his authoritative proclamations to the seven churches. Then it moved on from there, and John was summoned up to the heavenly throne room, where he saw God and Christ being worshipped in chapters 4 and 5. Then in chapter 6, it recounts what happened when the first six scrolls were opened. And then in chapter 7, it shows all the people of God being sealed and be protected from God's wrath. And then once we've got to chapter 8, now the seventh seal is being opened. So when we look at all of this and we break it all down, and we look at Revelation 8, 1 through 5, kind of keep this in mind, that our prayers will be answered. Now, it opens with kind of a strange thing. When the Lamb opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about a half an hour. So when the Lamb opened that seventh seal, there was silence, a quiet time, a reverence. That seventh seal had been opened, and then there was nothing. There was basically just pure worship, heartfelt, no words, nothing that needed to be said. It was a time of reverence, a time of quiet. And it even goes so far as to say it was about a half an hour. Anybody that knows me knows that I'm a person who um, is virtually never quiet, right? I, I love to engage in conversation. I love to talk to people. I love to preach. I love to sing. All of those things. And I look at it as a gift, even though some people don't. I look at it as a gift because I believe that God gave me that gift in order to use it for Him. But to just sit down and just be quiet, not sleeping, but just be quiet for 30 minutes, it seems like an eternity to me. For other people, oh, they love that quiet. For me, it's a long time. For you, perhaps, it's a long time. 30 minutes seems like a long time. But the seal was opened. And when all of the seal was opened, when that seventh seal was opened, it was a time of reverence before something big was about to happen. I think that maybe the real reason that there was that quiet was because of the scene, that what was about to happen, the blowing of the trumpets was coming. There was going to be um, loud things that were about to happen. So there was this time of silence. And then he says, and I saw the seven angels who stand before God. They were given seven trumpets. But another angel having a golden censer came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense, that he should offer it up with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar. Now, when we think about this, he's at the altar, and earlier we saw in the throne room underneath the altar all of the martyrs, all of those who had been martyred, all of those that were there, and they were continually saying, "How much longer?" And they were worshiping and praying. And so all of the saints and the martyrs, all of those, all of the prayers. Now think about this: what does God want to receive? He wants to receive that worship. One of the forms of worship is prayer. And in that prayer, there was an incense. And all of that combined together and going up. And we also all often talk about that God would receive our worship as a sweet aroma. And so we think about that, that the incense, the beautiful smell, the beautiful prayers, all going up to God for him to receive at that moment. And the angel is given, it says he was given much incense. So it was so much that was going up, and just a cloud. Probably it was so thick that you could even see through it. It would be that way, that um, all of the prayers that will be going forward along with the incense. And but then it says, not only after he did all of that, he says that he took the censer and filled it with fire from the altar and threw it to the earth. So all of these prayers, all of these things going up, and then God is going to answer those prayers. Those prayers of the martyrs was how much longer before you um, take care of all of the things that have happened? How much longer before you um, take care of the things that have happened to us? How much longer before your judgment is given? How much longer will all of that happen? And all of those prayers are coming up, and then we're going to see God answering prayer. He's answering the prayers with all of the things that are happening. Um, so it's an incredible time when we think about this, that our prayers will be answered. And so, um, before John even tells us about the trumpet blast, he makes sure to give us the picture and show us what's going on at the the scene and there in the throne room, there in heaven. Um, and the smoke with the incense and the prayer of the saints, it all rose up before God. Now, at the end of chapter 8 and verse 5, we see some things um, that we saw from the throne room of God in chapter 4 and verse 5. In chapter 4 and verse 5, it said this. It says, and from the throne proceeded lightnings, thunderings, and voices. Seven lamps of fire were burning before the throne, which are the seven spirits of God. And so now we have angel that has thrown down the fire from the altar, from the censer, thrown it down, and there's thunderings and lightnings and noise, those things that we see. We've already seen happen once, now we see an angel doing that again. And that's basically to show that these judgments are coming straight from God. Now, in 6 through 12, we begin to talk about the trumpets. And we begin to talk about the wrath on the world that's going on. So I want you to listen closely again to what it's saying here in verse 6. So the seven angels who had the seven trumpets prepared themselves to sound. The first angel sounded, and hail and fire followed, mingled with blood, and they were thrown to the earth. Now, um, and all of this that we're looking, all of these things that we're seeing, this judgment that's happening is a judgment to the earth. It's a judgment to the earth. Okay? So that keep that in mind. So all of the things that happened, hail and fire followed, mingled with blood, and they were thrown to the earth, and a third of the trees were burned up, and all green grass was burned up. So hail and fire mixed with blood. That's some incredible stuff that's going on right there. That's a lot of things that we think about. I can't even imagine. I mean, the fear alone would be so great. I don't know if you've ever been in a hailstorm. I've been in a hailstorm where the hailstones were um, probably about the size of a quarter in diameter. And man, it sounded like the roof was coming in. It was awful, and that was just small hail. I can't even begin to imagine what we're seeing here, what's happening. But one of the things that I want us to consider and to think about is this: John is writing down the things that he can see, and he relates it to the things that he knows. Remember, when John is seeing this in Revelation, this is a revelation of things to come. How long has it been since John was alive on the earth? It's been hundreds and hundreds of years since John was alive, thousands. So, in all of that, how much different do you think the world is now than it was when John was alive and the things that he sees? How many of you can think right now about maybe um, your descendants from 100 years ago? If they saw a television back then, they wouldn't have any idea what to relate that to because it didn't exist. Maybe they call it a picture box. Maybe they'd call it a radio, even if didn't even have radio. So all of the different things that they had then are so different from now. And there's so many things you think about your um, great grandparents, a computer, to be talking online with you as we are now. They would not have understood that. How is that possible? How can that happen? Because the technology had not come around. They would not know what was going on. So, what we see John writing and what we hear him saying, it may not be literal hailstones and fire. Perhaps it could be um, artillery raining down from some weapons. Perhaps it could be um, something of that nature where there's rockets or artillery, things that could be coming down to help understand the fire and the hailstones. Now, perhaps it is hailstones. Perhaps that's exactly what it is, and it's lightning flashes and fire coming down out of heaven. We know we've seen in Scripture where God sent fire down from heaven. We know we've seen in the past where God did those things. So I don't know. Um, we don't know exactly if it's going to be a natural type of phenomenon, something that God uses in that way, or if it will be something that could be man made that God uses in that way. But what we know is that there's something, whether it be actual hailstones or whether it be rockets or artillery, mortar fire, whatever, something that hail and fire is mingled with blood and it was thrown to the earth. So that's a lot of stuff that's going on. Now, one thing that would make you perhaps think that it is in fact hail and fire falling from the earth is when we think back that these judgments that are happening right now from the trumpet blowing are very familiar if you go all the way back to Exodus. Now, perhaps some of you are reading the Bible through this year and you began in January. And so perhaps you're already read through Exodus, or maybe you're in Exodus right now. And so the judgments and the things that God sent on the Egyptians because of Pharaoh, maybe they're fresh in your mind. But if not, just think about this: that when we look back in Exodus chapter 2 and we look at the fact that they cried out for help, they cried out to God, and God began to answer. And how did he answer the prayers? He answered it by sending judgment on the wicked. He answered it by sending judgment to those, and these plagues that are on Egypt are judgments that God sent in order to answer the prayers of his people. So when we look at all of this, we understand that um, this description of hail and fireballs, um, those are things that definitely happened in the scriptures back in Exodus when God was um, raining those things down. And so, if you remember, he sent hailstones. It would destroy everything. It would destroy the crops. It would destroy the livestock. It would destroy any person that was caught out in it. And he said, "Don't be outside when this happens, because it was going to happen. There was going to be all of the hail and the fire that was going to be coming down, and it would literally destroy everything." So if we think about all of that and we look at that judgment now, we talked about God answering prayers just a few moments ago. Now the angel blew the trumpet, and when the trumpet was blown, hailstones and fire and blood was thrown down. So, very similar to what we've seen in the past. Also, after all of the third of the trees was burned up and the grass was burned up, then the second angel sounded the trumpet, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood. Again, he says something like a great mountain was thrown into the sea. So if it was something like a great mountain that was thrown into the sea, we don't know that it was a mountain. We don't know really what it was, but we know that there was something like a mountain that was thrown into the sea. And what happened when it was thrown into the sea? The waters became blood. It says this great mountain was thrown in, or something like a great mountain was burning with fire, was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood. If you remember in the plagues of Egypt, what happened? Uh, Moses touched the waters with his staff and they turned to blood. So again, a similar type judgment. Everything that turned to blood, the fish died, the animals in the sea died, all of those things happened and it messed up their water supply. All of those things happened in Exodus as well. So very similar to that happened then is happening again now. Could it be a mountain, a literal mountain that is tossed into the sea by God? Sure, it can. God could do anything like that he wants, but could it be something different? Could it be something that is thrown into the sea from, say, perhaps a missile, that's been sent in? Like I don't know if you've ever seen a cruise missile. They're so large that they have to be transported on a very large truck bed that hauls those things in, and it's very, very large. It's got a tail of fire behind it when it fires, and very easily it could be something similar to that went into the water. Now, why would it turn to blood? Because God chose to make it that way. Could it be that it was red like blood? He doesn't say that. He says it turned to blood and all the animals, all the sea was killed. So it says it was burning with fire, was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood, and a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. Well, you think about what would happen if something like that hit the water. Tsunamis everywhere, right? I mean, it would be tidal waves all over the place, and um, just the impact alone would kill the whatever sea life was anywhere in the vicinity of this great mountain that would have hit. Any ships, anything that was on the water would have certainly been destroyed. So again, these are judgments that are happening, and what we can tell by this is that the prayers were going up before this. The prayers of the martyrs, the prayers of God's saints were going up along with the incense, and God answers the prayers, and now the judgment is coming. How long will you wait before you bring the judgment on those that martyred us? How long will you wait before that happens? That's what the martyrs asked earlier in the book of Revelation when we were reading. And now the prayers have gone up, the angels are sounding the trumpet, and judgments are beginning to happen. So when we see these things, that's pretty incredible to think about and to think about the similarities between the judgments then and the judgments in Exodus. So You have the first judgment, and um, the first judgment was affected the dry land. Um, the second judgment affected the rivers and the springs. I'm sorry, is the sea. And then the third judgment is the rivers and the springs. So when we look at this, we see what happens with the third judgment. It says, then the third angel sounded, and a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many men died from the water because it was made bitter. So now we have something else that is coming down, and it says a star that fell. The star was named Wormwood. The star made the water bitter. The star that came down could easily be an asteroid. It easily could be a meteor. Anything that. What are those things that we? They're falling objects from space. They could be stars that have flamed out. They could be lots of things that fall. But all of that is coming, and as it comes in, this star that comes in and hits the streams and the rivers, not only does it hit the streams and the rivers, but it also makes them bitter. It makes them where you can't drink them. Wormwood, by the way, wormwood um, is a term for bitter. That's what it is. And so um, the name of the star was wormwood, and many people died from the water because it had been made bitter or poisonous. Okay, so they died from that. So the just like the second trumpet, the third corresponded just like a plague in Egypt, which affected the Niles and all of its rivers and canals in Exodus 7:19. You can look at that in Exodus 7:19. What did it say? Let's look back right quick. All right, in Exodus chapter 7 and verse 19, it says, the Lord spoke to Moses, say to Aaron, take your rod, stretch it out, your hand over the waters of Egypt, over the streams, over the rivers, over the ponds, over all the pools of water, that they may become blood, and there shall be blood throughout all the land of Egypt, both in buckets of wood and pitchers of stone. And Moses and Aaron did so just as the Lord commanded. And so again, we see now all of the rivers and the streams that were affected. They were affected, the rivers and the streams were affected, just like a plague that struck Egypt. So when we see the similarities and we see the things that happen, it's pretty incredible how they match up. And um, so could it be a star? Yes, that's what it says. I believe absolutely it could be that God used a star that he threw out of heaven into the earth. And because of that, there was a poison basically that made the waters bitter and destroyed. It could be something, the impact alone could have caused a gas to be released or something that would happen that poisoned all of those rivers and streams. But first was the dry land, second was the sea, third was the rivers and the springs. And so we look at this and we see how it kind of matches up. And just you know, think about all of these things that are happening and how we take for granted all of the water that we drink. We take for granted all of um, um, the oceans and the sea life and everything that comes out of that. We take for granted, all of the grass and the trees. I mean, we take for granted all that stuff. What if suddenly it was destroyed? How would that affect our own way of life? That's pretty incredible. And so these are definitely judgments that are coming. They're very similar to the plagues that happened thousands of years earlier. So, um, first was the dry land, second was the sea, third was the rivers and springs, and then fourth, there's something else. It says, um, then the fourth angel sounded, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them were darkened. A third of the day did not shine, and likewise the night. So in this fourth trumpet, when it was blown, it affected the heavens. It affected a third of the sun, a third of the moon, a third of the stars, and so it absolutely created darkness where there was not darkness before. Um, and we know that in Exodus chapter 10, there were darkness that covered the earth, and the Egyptians suffered 3 days of darkness. That was a plague that God sent. So again, it follows along that same pattern. So a third of all of the heavenly lights were blacked out. A third of it was blacked out. So um, the darkness is taking over in areas, where we're used to there being light. So certainly there was a lot happening in that. Now, I want us to stop for a moment and think about God answering the prayers. How would we pray? The martyrs are saying they're praying, how long will you wait? They're praying, their prayers are going up. I know there are people today that talk about they're praying for the end to come, for God to send Jesus back, to collect His people, that the end would come soon. There are people that are praying for all of that. But here's what one thing I want us to think about as we're praying, because we know that God answers prayer, right? We know that God answers prayer. We're looking at some of the ways that God answered prayers, is answering prayers in Revelation. We know that that happens. So, how can we pray? What are some of the ways that we can pray? Well, number one, the first thing that I think that we should be praying about is we should be praying that all of those who do not know God would come to know Him. All of those that are wicked, all of those that are sinful, all of those that are causing terrible hard times on the earth, all of those who are oppressing people on the earth, all of those who are doing all of those things, that God would change their heart. That's number one, that we would pray that God would change their heart, that He absolutely would change their heart. But if their heart is hardened, and if they absolutely will not change, that He would destroy them, that they would be removed. That, oh, preacher, you can't be praying for people to be destroyed. You can't be praying for people to be removed. That's awful. That's a terrible, hateful thing to say. No, it's not. It's not a hateful thing at all to say, because the reality is, if you aren't for God, you're against Him. If you're an evil, filled with evil, then it needs to be removed. The evil needs to be removed from the world. Now, listen. First of all, pray that they will be, um, that their heart will be changed. That's the number one prayer, that their heart will be changed, and that because of that, God can use them and lift them up in many, many ways. That's the number one. But if not, then the prayer should be that God would remove them. That if they are so consumed with evil that they will not repent and accept Jesus as Lord and Savior, that He would remove them, that He would not leave them as a stumbling block, a hindrance to those who are trying to reach, who those that we're still trying to reach, that those evil would not be a stumbling block, that they would be removed. Absolutely, I think that's how we need to pray. But listen, if He doesn't remove them that way, they will be removed one day. They will be removed one day. These judgments that are happening, I want you to look at this last verse in 13. I want you to see what it has to say in Revelation 8:13. And I looked and I heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, "Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, because of the remaining blast of the trumpet of the three angels who are about to sound." Now, we won't pick up the fifth, sixth, and seventh until chapter 9, but what I want you to see is, some translations say, "Woe to the earth dwellers." The opening of the first four seals in chapter 6 resulted in things that took place on earth. And then the opening of the last three seals, John saw things taking place in heaven. It's similar with the trumpets. The first four trumpets, John sees the earth and elements of the natural world is what is affected. But when we get to 13, it says, "Woe before the last trumpet blast." Woe before the last trumpet blast. Woe, woe, woe. That's before the last trumpet blast. There's about to be a trumpet blast. Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, to the dwellers of the earth, to the earth dwellers. And so what we see here in this is those who dwell on the earth. That's what he was talking about. Um, these woes come from God Himself through the angel who says woe, and notice that they are directed at those who dwell on the earth or earth dwellers. Now some believe that that could be those who live for this world. So in other words, it's not woe, woe, woe to believers, because why would believers worry or be concerned whatsoever about those judgments, because they've already been redeemed from that? But it's woe to the earth dwellers, woe to those who um, live for this world, those who are not living for God, but instead they're living for this world. Woe to them. I think this is a brief moment um, to open that up and say that next trumpet's about to sound. The next trumpet's about to sound. You got to do something now. I don't know. Um, but that's what it seems like to me, that there's a brief moment that this next trumpet's about to sound. And before it does, you need to change. You need to turn away from living for this world and instead live for God. You need to change that. Um, but we know that God is going to judge. He's going to judge anyone who refuses him, and he's going to judge them harshly. These judgments that are already falling are judgments of the world, and they're judgments of things that are happening in the world, and they're very similar to those very same things that happened all the way back during Exodus. So, as we think about Revelation, it's hard to talk about Revelation and think about it's still to come, but we don't know when. There's some that believe some of these things have already happened and they're happening during our current day. Um, and there are things that they would relate to some of the judgments that are happening. Um, I believe that these things are still to come. I believe that this is what, when he showed John, these are things to come, that they are still things to come, that they will come, and that God will use them. When we look at all of this and we try to make some sense of it, remember that the judgments are God's. They're not ours, they're His. Sometimes we think about some of the judgments and the things that happen, and we say, well, we don't understand. Why would it be that way? Why would it be that way? And um, we don't understand. But our ways are not God's ways, and God's ways are not our ways. People look at what's going on, what has gone on in the last few years. Look at this last year. Hurricanes. My gracious, how many hurricanes did we see that affected the United States? How many hurricanes did we see worldwide? There were so many hurricanes that were happening. We've seen lots of terrible things that have happened in our world. And people say, well, how can God let these awful things happen? Well, these things come into our world because it is a fallen, sinful world. These things come into our world because of a fallen, sinful world. And so we're not going to have a perfect world because of sin. When sin came into the world, the perfection was over. And all of these things that happen, they come in, and absolutely, I think that they are, God allows these things to happen due to judgments of our world. I'm not saying specific people, I'm not saying a specific region. I'm saying that God allows these things to happen because of sin in the world. And if there were no sin, we wouldn't have any of these terrible things. We'd be living in the Garden of Eden from the very beginning, right? But that's not the case. These judgments, these things that are happening in Revelation, are things that are worse than anything we've ever seen, but still it's happening because of sin. That's why the inhabitants of the earth, those who um, live for the world, That's why these things are happening. Woe to them because of what's about to happen. We look at these things and we have to stop and think, how much longer do we have? How much longer will God tarry? How much longer before he comes? That's the question the martyrs under the altar are asking in heaven. How much longer? If we go all through Scripture, there's times when it says, how much longer? How much longer will I have to wait? How much longer will I wait for this? How much longer will I wait for that? And the answer is always a little while. Now, we don't know what a little while is. If you tell a child in a little while, they're going to ask you back in 2 minutes, has it been a little while yet? If it's even adults that are waiting for something exciting that they want to happen, a little while is literally a few minutes. But to God, a little while, we don't know how long that is. But we have to wait a little while until that time comes. It is a little while in this versus eternity. So we don't know how much longer before God says, go get my people. We don't know how much longer before the trumpets start to sound and the wrath starts to be poured out. Also, by the way, we will see as we go along that the trumpets and the judgments that are happening also reflect the bowls of wrath that will be poured out later in Revelation. How much longer before all that happens? I don't know. But until then, listen, we need to be praying that God would reach people, that people would be broken and come to Him, that they would come to know Him. If there are people that are um, causing trouble and evil in this world, then we pray that God would change their heart. And if they will not change and they won't repent, then we know what's going to happen. So we need to be praying, but we don't just need to be praying. We need to be sharing. We need to be telling. We need to be trying to reach people for Christ because we don't know how much longer. A little while. We don't know how long a little while is. You know, God's been saying a little while for over 2,000 years. How much longer will it be before a little while is over? I don't know. Four trumpets that we talked about tonight. Four trumpets that have sounded. The first one affected the dry land, the second one affected the sea, the third one affected the rivers and the streams, and the fourth one affected the celestial bodies of heaven, the sun, the moon, and the stars. Those are the four trumpets so far. Next week, we'll be in chapter 9, and we'll begin with the fifth trumpet, starting right there. So there's still more to come in, um, in these trumpets that will be sounding. There's still more judgments that will be happening. There's still a lot that will be going on. So I encourage you to read ahead. Um, Read it, pray about it, study it, look at it, and then we'll get together and discuss it in another week. We'll talk about it. And perhaps you listen to what I say and you say, well, I don't see that. I see something different. Well, that's okay. Um, you pray that God would show you what He wants you to see. And then we'll discuss it. But the important thing is, do you know Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior? That's the main thing. If you know Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, whether we completely agree with what we read in the book of Revelation or not, it doesn't matter as long as you know Jesus as Lord and Savior. Then in that case, all the other stuff is things that we're going to do our best to understand. But God has told us that there are things in this world that you will not understand. There are things that you will never know and understand on this side of heaven. He's told us that. But we'll do our best to understand and live the things that He shows us each and every day. Listen, I thank you for joining with me tonight. Don't forget, there's always stuff going on at Orchard Baptist Church. You can check out our website at orchardbaptist.net and see what's going on. If you've never been there, go there, click I'm new here, and fill out the information. And we'd love to keep in touch with you. If you um, have opportunity and you just, you want to give, you say, I want to give to the church, but I don't want to come during this time of COVID, you can go on that same website and find the tithes and offerings tab, and you can give through that way. You can click on it and give certainly through that. So we encourage, however you would like to. We encourage you to come and join with us on Sunday mornings if you feel safe to do that. We do everything we can to according to the standards that the CDC put out of sanitizing and distancing and wearing masks and all of those things. We do all of those things to try to keep everybody safe. And trust me, you're absolutely not putting yourself at any more risk walking into the church on Sunday morning than you are going out to a restaurant to eat. So if you feel safe enough to get out, we invite you to come at 10:45 on Sunday morning. If not, then we encourage you to join us online on Sunday morning at 10:45 as well. Our students are still meeting on Wednesday nights at 6:30, and other than that, that's the only services that we have. And of course, we'll continue our online services on Wednesday night. Um, I don't know of anything else that I just need to pass on to you, but I just want to again say thank you for joining together. I pray that God is really touching you through this study. And other than that, I just want to say God bless and good night.